This week, we're going to learn about the good and the bad of CloudFormation StackSets. I have, you might say, a love-hate relationship with CloudFormation StackSets. The kind of relationship that resulted in my children learning some colorful metaphors a bit younger than society commonly approves of. All right, what are StackSets? Here's the short version. They allow you to deploy CloudFormation templates across multiple accounts and regions in your AWS organization. StackSets solves the problems like I need to deploy this IAM role for my ops team into every account and every region that we use, and I need it to automatically deploy the role as I add new accounts. Here's how StackSets work. They start in your management account and are always enabled, but you can also delegate administration to other accounts. And that's what we're always going to do because I said so, and that's all that your CIO needs to know. A StackSet is really just CloudFormation at heart. There's no special formatting or anything else, although you do want to write them in ways that will work across different regions. There are both manual and automated modes for using StackSets. Now, we're going to use the automated one for this lab, largely because that's what we need. I tend not to use StackSets very often when they're manually deployed. And what I mean by manual is that the deployment is a one and done. It's a one-time push operation, push this CloudFormation template to deploy the stack where you want it in your organization. This is as opposed to automation mode where you create a stack set you assign to organizational units and regions. And then it's going to deploy into all of those OUs and regions. And if an account is even moved into one of those OUs, the stack set will automatically deploy it into that new account. The other thing is if you update stack sets, it's then going to try to update all of them in all the accounts in all of those OUs and regions. And I think you can start seeing the power of these. Set up the stack set, and as things move into the OU, they'll automatically get that CloudFormation template. And as things move out of the OU, you even have the option to automatically delete them. You can imagine a scenario where you could deploy something you want in all of your dev workloads, but not necessarily when you move that account into your production OU. Now, by the way this works is StackSets will actually put that CloudFormation stack into each of those individual accounts. And you'll see that when a stack set is deployed, but it's managed up above from the management account or the delegated administration account. Now, the way this works is when you start using StackSets, it creates a service-linked account, a service-linked role with full administrative privileges in all of the accounts of your organization. Now, when I was researching this post, I learned that there's actually an option I had not used before to create self-managed permissions for StackSets. So instead of full admin, you could actually set up to use more lower level default permissions and assign those to specific accounts. So that's a cool update, but for reasons you're going to see when we're going to use the service link role option today, the full admin role. But kudos to AWS for this. And if you go to the blog post, I've got that linked in there so you can read the documentation. Now, there are some more advanced options and capabilities we're not going to cover in our labs today. For example, you could actually use a Lambda function to validate something in an account that it's set up the way you want it to be before it will ever deploy the stack set. It's something called target account gate, and that's pretty cool. And go check out the blog post because I do have a great diagram from AWS that I copy and pasted in there that's superior to anything I could do with the whiteboard. Now, the biggest issue I've had with stack sets is they are not very resilient to drift. So if you aren't familiar with the concept, drift is a term we use when some infrastructure as code has been deployed, but then somebody goes in and makes a change to something that's already specified in the template. Then if you go to make an update or delete the template, it might fail. And in my case, it pretty much always does fail. What's a simple example? Okay. Imagine if you created a VPC using a stack set, and then in one of your accounts, someone creates a security group by hand. So assume you deployed that stack set into like 100 different accounts. And in one of those accounts, somebody creates an additional security group. Well, let's say you're making a big change and you do an update or more likely a delete and for that VPC. And you can't do that via StackSets until you delete the new security group because you can't delete a VPC if it has any security groups in it. So this is like sometimes these things break and sometimes they don't. But The reality is when you're managing hundreds or thousands of accounts and stack sets pushed into those accounts, it doesn't take much to run into trouble. I've had some stack sets I've actually had to go to support to get removed out of my account. Now, I'm going to show you how to use service control policies to minimize drift on critical security resources, but understand when you use stack sets, you will encounter situations where they've broken, and I've frequently broken them or had them fail for my various deployments. I'm going to try to steer you towards using them in ways that generally will avoid those conditions and hopefully keep you out of trouble. Now, stack sets, we can use them for security or using them against security. Stack sets are extremely valuable for security because they allow us to consistently deploy security hooks and controls into accounts. For example, we're going to use them to deploy the IAM roles that we need for various security auditing and operations. And if you use third-party tools like CSPM, odds are you're going to use stack sets to deploy those into your tools. You would use stack sets to send logs into your SIM. There's tons and tons of uses for stack sets. Now, the danger is that by default, they can do nearly anything and everything to all of your accounts. If someone gets into your management account or any account with delegated administration for stack sets, they can push CloudFormation throughout the org and build in backdoors, enable unwanted services, or even delete the stacks that hold your security tooling. That's why I think of StackSets as a tool for privileged administration across multiple AWS accounts. And I've got some rules of thumb that I use to help reduce the security risk of StackSets. Because StackSets are not bad. We're going to use them. We're going to use them a bunch, but we just need to understand how to use them in the best ways. And the first thing is we're going to use delegated administration. We're going to use that carefully, though. And I recommend using delegated admin usually to only a couple of privileged accounts. Typically, it's going to be an operations account and a security operations account. Why? Because we use stack sets to deploy very consistent things throughout our entire organization. And all of those shared services and those consistent things generally are managed by operations and or by security. That's not going to be like managed by individual development teams. Also, with any account that does have those stack set delegated administration privileges, tightly control IAM. Don't let just anybody and everybody have access to those stack sets. Now, when it comes to those self-managed permissions, I don't tend to use those a lot for stack sets, but I haven't been in a lot of situations where I needed to really limit what ops or another team could do with them that I couldn't limit better with the service control policy. These situations do exist, so keep that in your back pocket. Like if you have an ops team and you only want to allow them to manage networking across your organization, you could do that with those self-managed stack set permissions, as opposed to just giving them the default service linked role, which is going to allow them to do everything. Also remember that stack sets can't override your security invariants like your service control policies. And I'd really like to back up anything important I'm doing, all of my critical security shared resources like IAM roles with service control policies. And in fact, I've used them to even protect stack sets themselves. I've used them to protect the things deployed by stack sets. And we're going to do that as we go through the process of these labs. For teams using stack sets, really restrict who on that team can deploy them and have those deployments ideally go through a deployment pipeline for that has embedded security controls. And we haven't really covered deployment pipelines yet. That is how you should be using infrastructure as code, as opposed to logging into the console and doing the things that we're doing the way we're doing them in these labs. But there's a whole lot of stuff I need to get to before we get to deployment pipelines. But I do think I need to add some of those labs sooner rather than later at this point, because now we're getting into some of these more advanced techniques that's going to make a difference. I just like to think of stack sets as full admin for the org. Can do pretty much anything in any account. Now, at least it can't do every API calls. Remember, it's limited to what CloudFormation can do. But and to be honest, I haven't really seen self-managed permissions used very often. Thus, it's easier to just always assume stack sets in that full admin mode using that service linked role instead of that more self-managed, that more limited permissions mode. But you really should consider those, especially if you do allow multiple teams in different in different parts of your business to use stack sets. Now that's really the basics, and it's going to make a lot more sense as we start using them. Remember, at the core, it's just CloudFormation, but it's CloudFormation you can push up from the top into all of your individual accounts. So let's go ahead and jump into the lab. Okay, so what we're going to do in this lab is we're going to set up delegated administration and we're going to deploy just a really simple stack set that we are going to use later to get us started. It's going to be for an IAM role that we need for our event bridge rule to forward back to our central event bridge. To start this, we have to go through the delegated admin process. So let's go ahead and go into the console. And we're going to start in our CloudSLA administration account. Now, just in case, I can't remember if we'll be able to see the security operations account ID when we get into it. So let's just copy that, have it to our clipboard, and then go into the CloudSLA administrator access. Oh, while I'm here, why are we doing this to our security operations account? Well, if you recall what I talked about last week is I use security operations as the account where I actually make security changes to other accounts. And the automation we're going to build is going to run out of the security automation account because that's where we set up our event bridge to receive the alerts. So we're going to have our Lambda functions that make those changes, and all of our analysis and everything else is going to occur in that security operations account. So we need to be able to set up and use that security operations account is going to be the one where we also like deploy things into other accounts. So think of security operations in the way I set up organizations as the most privileged of all of the security accounts that we're going to use. This and IAM are probably the top two. That's why we're not deploying this in security audit or anything else. Okay, let's go back in and I'm going to click on administrator access for CloudSLA. And this is one of those services, if you recall, delegated administration, sometimes you have to set it up in the organizations part, or sometimes you set it up in the service where you're actually setting things up anyway, at least in terms of the delegated administration for for getting into these different service accounts. So I'm in CloudFormation and Stacks we're used to. Look, that's our security alerts one that we set up a while ago. Well, now we're going to go to StackSets. And you'll notice right away it says activate trusted access with AWS organizations. All right, so it's right here where we want it to be. And I'm going to activate trusted access. And so now we can actually do delegated administration. So that successfully added the trusted access. And I'm going to go into delegated administrators and we're going to register a delegated administrator. And it's asking for that account ID. And for once, I remember to get the account ID ahead of time. So that's the account ID of my security operations account. Okay, we'll register delegated administration. And that account now has permissions to create and manage service managed stack sets for your organization, which is exactly what we want. With that complete, we can close this window and we want to go into our security operations account. So hit the down arrow and we can go with either admin or security full admin. They do the same thing. You know, what's the difference? Administrator access is up here, so I don't have to click 2 rows below. Now we can go into CloudFormation and deploy our stack set. We'll go into CloudFormation itself and you go from stacks. Let's go click on stack sets. To create our stack set, let's go to create stack set. Now the permissions we're going to use is the service managed permissions. This is kind of cool. So what this means is that we're in the security operations account and up here is our management account. And the way this works is when we use the service managed permissions, which is what I use for my high-level security stuff, is that the security operations account will create a template that lives in the management account that then gets distributed to all of the other accounts in the organization. If you use the self-service permissions, the permissions would be in security operations. You would have to have a role in all of those other accounts that you could do cross-account access with. We don't have that set up yet, so we're going to just really stick with the top level, the service managed permissions. That's generally what I use for myself in security. Really high level, trusted, like deep admin operations will use that. But if you have a lower level operations kinds of things, you do still have the ability to restrict the access of what they can do. They don't need full control over all of stack sets. So it's nice that we've got some options here. Okay, we're going to stick with service managed permissions and let me punch in my template. We'll take a look at that in a moment. We'll click next. So we're going to call this SecOps event forward role. So it's descriptive, and we'll just say creates a role for forwarding security events to the security operations team. Now, the reason we want to be good with our descriptions is this creates a CloudFormation template in an account that they can't modify. That's why this helps them figure out who to call if there's a problem, or so they understand what's going on in their account. We're going like top-down management. We're taking over part of their account, doing our own thing. We want to make sure, I really shouldn't have said things that way. We want to make sure that we are informing them of what we're doing and make it easy for them to figure it out when they see strange things showing up. Okay, now for the parameters, it's the security event bus account ID. So we are in our security operations account. Actually, I am not in my security operations account. So let me pause. I'm going to flip back over to that account and fix things up. Sorry about that little blip. I had actually had to fix something else in the labs. Forgot to switch into the right account here in the middle of things. So my descriptions might have changed, but now I'm in the correct account, and I'm going to go ahead, copy that account ID. So I'm in security operations. This is where we are building all of our infrastructure for this automation. And I'm going to paste that account ID in and click next. Not going to worry about tags or anything or the execution configuration, but I do need to acknowledge that we're going to create some IAM resources. Click next. Now, here's where the magic of StackSets comes into place. So deploy new sets, and our deployment target is going to be our entire organization. Because of that, the auto deploy won't really matter because we're deploying into all OUs in our organization. But if you did select deploy to OUs, you'd pick your OUs, and then you could decide to keep or delete the stacks as they go in and out of the organizational unit. We will use that in a future lab, so you're going to get to see both options, and actually that lab's not too far away. Now we need to specify regions. We're creating a role, IAM role, so you could deploy it anywhere. We'll just do it in US East North Virginia. As you know from IAM being a global service, you could push the stack into anyone you want. We're going to do it in North Virginia. And maximum number of concurrent accounts, let's set that to 100. And if we do that, we have to set our failure tolerance to like no more than one less than 100 because things, depending on how things break. So I do like to deploy multiple places, and I like to deploy in parallel. So all specified regions in parallel. Doesn't really matter in this one because we're only deploying to one region. And let's go ahead and click next. All right, everything is all set up. I'm going to click submit. No errors, no whammies. That's why I got in that wrong account. Good, okay, it's running. Now I can track the progress on this page here if I go into the operations. So this is running, deployed, not deployed. You'll see it in a minute. I'm going to click this this is like the weirdest UX thing I've ever seen. When you click on the operation, it'll pull you to the stack instances. And you'll notice that it hasn't deployed yet. So I'm going to pause the video. It's just CloudFormation doing its thing in the back end. And when I come back, you'll be able to see it. Literally after I pressed the pause button and clicked refresh, it popped up. So you can see it's running. So it's deploying into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means that there's 6 accounts in our organization other than the management account that's deploying into. I'm going to pause again while we wait for this to finish up. Okay, the same thing happened. It finished up right away. Now, if I go into any of these accounts, and we can actually see that here because we deployed into the account we're operating in. Remember, this got pushed out from the management account. So I can go into stacks, and if I hit a refresh here, it should show up. Oops, I'm in Oregon. I have to go to US East Virginia where we deployed this into. And you might be hearing my dog barking in the back. Sorry about that. And you can see that it deployed down. It's got a name. But notice that that security ops event forwarder role, that was the name that we gave it. So that worked. And we can see all of the information. And any of your admins in any of your accounts can see this. So there's the info, because it's just pushing a CloudFormation template into an individual stack. And you can see the history of it, and it looks just like regular CloudFormation. But here's a cool thing. So if I click on template, you can see, oh no, it even includes the template here. You can actually see the variable that we inserted. So this is a more advanced feature where you can actually substitute a value. So we collected a parameter up at the top, and that was a string, and it was the account ID. In this case, it's the same account that we're in. And then we actually inserted that into this path, security events bus account ID, so that it properly is setting up the, and this is the name of what we were, or the path of what we were building. And this allows them access to that central security bus. So that's a really cool feature of CloudFormation I had mentioned before, being able to insert parameters and then have those dynamically update what's going on. We use it a lot in CloudFormation StackSets because we're deploying deeper in our environment. And that's it for what we are covering for this week. So we did our delegated administration and we used the StackSets. Now we pushed a role in, and that role, as you can see from the template file that we've got up, has permission to forward events to our central security bus. We're going to be deploying more of this stuff later, but that's it for today, and I hope you have a great week.